This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. So glad you're tuning into our program today. Very excited about our guest, Steve Skipper. What a story this guy has. You will not want to miss what Steve Skipper has to say. Before we get to our conversation with Steve, I want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. Articles, devotionals, every podcast, all available at sportspectrum.com. And my email address is jason@sportspectrum.com. And you can email me directly. Maybe you have some comments on today's show or a guest idea for a future show. You can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And we are thankful to our presenters today, our sponsors and partners, IJM, the International Justice Mission. Check them out at ijm.org/TF. You can join the fight to end slavery, violence, and oppression by becoming a freedom partner with the International Justice Mission as they help to protect more than 150 million people from violence across the world. Check them out at ijm.org/TF to become a freedom partner today. Today on Sports Spectrum, we bring to you the story of Steve Skipper. One of the more incredible stories that you'll ever hear. This man probably should not have lived past the age of 16. Growing up, he was in gangs, drugs, saw some horrific things happen at very young ages, grew up in civil rights era of the 60s in small town Alabama, very segregated, and just was in a very difficult place at a young age. And now here he is, and he's become one of the most prolific artists in the country in the realms of sports, civil rights, equestrian, portraiture, Christian artwork. He's shattering the barriers of race and education in the art world and gives all of his credit to the Lord. And the testimony that he shares on how he came to know who Christ is, I don't know what to say other than it's just incredible. In fact, this whole story of Steve Skipper is incredible, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing his story right now on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen to Steve Skipper joining us on the show. Steve Skipper, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
Thank you, sir. I'm very, very honored to be here.
That's good. I'm glad to talk to you. I was really fascinated getting to look at a sneak preview of this Colors of Character movie and the documentary on your life. It's an artist's journey to redemption. I love that word, redemption. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Colors of Character and maybe the initial reaction when you found out that your life was going to be in a documentary?
This was the most tremendous thing. I think it was hard for me to really take in. It still is. I'm still kind of pinching myself to see if it's for real. Coming from where I came from and, where God brought me from, I think that for me to be sitting here talking to you about a movie coming out on, what we were doing and what God brought me from, it's just unbelievable.
Well, I'll tell you something. Your story is an amazing one. I don't want to give it all away, but I do want to spend some time here kind of diving into it because your journey has taken you here, there, and everywhere, it sounds like, in terms of what you've been through and how God worked in your life. So let's start with your childhood a little bit. Tell us about growing up, what life was like in Alabama. I know you're still there, and kind of where maybe the role sports played in your life when you were a young boy.
I think growing up in a place called Homewood, little part of Homewood called Rosedale. This was back in the 60s, during the civil rights movement. This is not something that we were reading about. The civil rights movement is actually going on. And so I remember, vividly the day that Dr. King was killed. I remember my parents' reaction, my whole neighborhood's reaction to that. And at the same time being bused from our neighborhood school into the white school system, that was actually a traumatic experience for me because it's totally different atmosphere, for not only for the kids that were coming with me to the white schools, but for the white kids for us to be coming into. It was a very, very traumatic event, but at the same time, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so getting to know different people, different races, and different creeds and different nationalities and stuff like that, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think God was preparing me for where he wanted to take me, because my mind had to open up to different people and how they were and stuff like that. And going into the fourth grade, you get to know people. As you grow up with them, you get to know them. You get to know the difference between Chinese and Japanese, and you never make that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to know the difference between Italians and Greeks, and you never make that mistake. So there's another such thing as, we used to think that there was only black people and white people. But when I got to the white schools, I started to realize there were totally different group of people that God had created. And they were very, very proud of their heritages, and they should be. And it was very important for us to get to know one another. And those friendships last today, still today. And it prepared me to go out where God was sending me into the world, and to be able to relate to different people of different races and get a lot of stuff done.
You used the word traumatic when you were referring to Dr. King's death and to being bussed into a different school system. Can you kind of take us through what that was like? Because obviously we're in an interesting time here in 2020 with the race relations and kind of, a new movement, if you will, that took place after the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. But a lot of people, I think, don't understand what it was really like. And it was probably much worse, is my guess, because I wasn't around. But what it was like in the 60s, being a kid. I know you were a kid, but still going through it, Dr. King's death is one that people look back at and just think, wow, where were you when that happened, if you were alive? Can you kind of take us through that word traumatic and what you meant when you were going through some of those situations?
Well, as a kid during that time, our parents, with everything that was going on racially, you talking about Birmingham, Alabama, where, this was a powder keg of the civil rights movement. And so our parents were tremendously sheltering to try to keep us away from stuff. And so growing up in the little neighborhood of Rosedale, where I grew up, pretty much the only world that you knew was inside of Rosedale. There was a white neighborhood that was close to Rosedale, but there was a wall. There was a brick wall that was built from, all the way down this street. In this long street, there was a brick wall. And we were always taught, don't go over that wall. And so we always, as kids, go into the woods and stand on top of the brick wall and look over there, and we'd see the pretty houses and stuff like that in the white neighborhood, but we were always told never cross that line. And so the sheltering that we had, we didn't know anybody but people that were in our neighborhoods. The only time I saw a white man or a white person was the insurance man. Maybe somebody like that, or see white people every now and then on TV. But as far as experiencing, no, there was no experience. There was no coming face to face and stuff like that. So when we were busted to the school system, this was coming face to face, and this was actually shocking that you could actually see people of a different color, and some of those people they were shocked, because it was traumatic for them too. But then at the same time, there were some of those people that didn't want us there. And so for me, as a fourth grade kid, I was just like, man, I'm seriously taken out of my comfort zone. And now I'm going to have to be trying to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic with all this stuff going on. And it's totally impossible in my mind. But looking back, we had some tremendous teachers. We had tremendous school system principal that understood exactly what was going on and kept things as calm as they could. And I think they did a tremendous job of doing that. And the way they brought us together, because it wasn't just a traumatic thing for the kids, the teachers. There were African-American teachers there. There were white teachers there. There were all kinds of teachers there. But I look back, man, I'm talking about, it was such a tremendous job that they did of holding things together that my hats off to them.
As you got older, I know just kind of watching the documentary and hearing you describe your journey in your young adulthood, you got caught up in gangs, drugs. It got pretty bad, didn't it?
Oh, it got very, very bad. By the time I was 13 years old, I was jumped into the gang one night, you know, after experiencing a tremendous amount of dysfunction in my home. And I think that the dysfunction that kids experience in their homes, I think parents need to really, really look at that, because when you don't, that dysfunction opens you up for anything that the enemy can throw at you and his deception. When you're young like that, you don't know how to handle it. And so the dysfunction in the home can really break you in a way where it sets you up for whatever he wants you to have, and you don't even realize you've been set up. And so the gangs present themselves as family. And when you got dysfunction in your home, that's what you're hungry for, is family. And when somebody comes to you and say, you know, I'll take a bullet for you, I mean, I'll die for you. I mean, that's what they present themselves as. You know, we're going to be in all these gang fights and all this stuff and stuff like that, and I'm going to be willing to die for you. And you fall for it. And what the enemy is really trying to deceive you away from the fact that the person who really died for you, and that's Jesus Christ. And so I think it's from 13 to 16, you'd be surprised what the enemy can do in the life of a kid in 3 years. You know, that's why Jesus said, don't give any place to the devil. If you give him 3 years, he can do a tremendous amount. And so the Crips, it's not a gang like little kids hanging on the corner or something like that. It's a very, very sophisticated, evil operation. And so once I got into that, man, it was just like, I was like, from the anger that I had in me from the family dysfunction, I was qualified to receive every demon that Satan had to come inside of me.
Hmm. Can you give us a description of some of the things you did see? I can't imagine it was pleasant, but give us one idea or thought on like what was going on. I think people hear gangs, they hear drugs. Obviously, that's terrible, and you kind of start formulating what that looks like in your brain. But you were living through it, and I'm just wondering, kind of what were some of the things that you saw at such a young age that maybe you probably shouldn't have been seeing, but you had to witness because you were in the gang.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of times you see people kill a lot. And so you expose, you know, this is a totally different ballgame when it comes to, you know, what an ordinary person thinks drug abuse is and an ordinary person thinks gang activity is. This is a totally different world, and it's extremely organized, and Satan is the one who's in charge of it. And when it comes to him, he is the ultimate of evil. So when it comes to that situation, man, I mean, anything that you think it is, it's a million times worse. And so you're seeing this stuff all the time. And not only you're seeing it, but you're involved in it. I think by the time I was 15, I started collecting money for the drug dealers. And so from the mind of the normal person, you would think that I would just go up and somebody just owes money, you go up and get the envelope and just take it. No. People that owe drug dealers money, you got to understand the quality of person that you're talking about. He's doing business with a drug dealer. So what kind of person are you talking about? You know, this is the lowest of the low. And he's getting to the point, the reason why he owes the drug dealer, he's trying to say he's not going to pay. And that never happens. So at this point, at 15, in 2 years, I rise up to the point to where I'm collecting money. And to be able to collect money, you got to be able to fight like an animal. And so there's a lot of guys that are inside of the gangs who are older, ex-service people and stuff like that, Army, Marine, Green Berets, that teach you how to fight. And so when I went out to get the money, they see this 14, 15-year-old kid coming in here talking about, I want so-and-so's money. And so they look at me and they go to laughing and all this kind of, look at this kid coming in here and see that probably was the last thing you would see before you wake up and realize you better go find that money. Mm. So I never came back without it. And so when it comes to somebody 40 or 50 years old or something like that, if they saw that little 15-year-old baby-faced kid walk in here and say, I want the money, you know, you better go get it. Mm. So this is an evil situation. A lot of times, you know, people refuse. I'm not going to give you the money. And so we're going to show everybody the fact that you don't keep, you know, the drug dealer's money. I got to make an example out of it.
Steve Skipper is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. It's an incredible story, and a powerful life to just a powerful experience, I should say, to go through at such a young age. How are you able to escape that life? And I know your testimony in Christ is a powerful one as well. Maybe they intersect here, but how are you able to escape that life?
Great question. In the Bible, it says that Jesus says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest for your soul." I don't care how evil a person is, there's a longing on the inside of your soul for God. And I don't care what you're doing beneath that, on the inside of that person, he wants to be free. And you get to a point where you get tired. The Bible says the way of the transgressor is hard. It's very hard. And God is waiting for a person to get to the point where you're tired. And I got to the point where at about 16 years old, I was tired. Mm-hmm. And so 15 and a half, I was tired, but I couldn't show it. You know, you're surrounded by people. At that point in time, I was a leader in a part of the gang that I was in. And so there was, we robbed some people one Friday night. We robbed some people. We stole a whole lot of stuff. And when I say we robbed some people, we didn't just go stick them up. We went into these people's homes in these affluent neighborhoods with a U-Haul truck. and we got everything. And so we were celebrating in a park one day and taking some drugs and stuff like that in a park. And so there was a guy by the name of Mike Mitchell. He was a lifeguard in a swimming pool in the park. And so there's 13 of us sitting down at the table, and he yells down, "Steve Skipper, you need to quit that stuff and give your life to God." And I looked up and I said, "What in the world is he saying?" And the guys asked, "You want us to go get him?" I said, "No, leave him alone." And so I'm saying, no, leave him alone, because on the inside, I'm tired and I'm hungry, but I can't show it. Yeah. And so he comes out of the pool area and comes down there where we are, which is suicide. You know, you start walking towards us and stuff like that. I got a 45 in my waist, and the other guys are packing also. And so when they see him start coming towards, they get up and they're ready to go and get him. And I said, "No, leave him alone. I'll take care of this." And so I get up, and they think that I'm fixing to walk over there and kill him. And so I walk over to him, and he says, "You need to give your life to Jesus Christ. God has a plan for your life." I've never heard this before. I never heard it like this before. And this guy, you don't understand, Mike is 17 years old, and he's about as bold as Billy Graham. And he comes down there, and he's saying all this stuff about you need to be saved, you need to give your life. I've never heard this before. But the way he's saying it and the anointing that's on his life is penetrating my heart. And at the same time, every demonic spirit that's on the inside of me is standing at attention. Because when it comes to Christ, there's nothing more powerful than Jesus. And when it comes to, I don't care how many demons you have on the inside of you, they know exactly when Jesus is in the room. And so I'm sitting there, and he's talking about the Lord, and the guys are back there behind me. They're wondering what's going on in this conversation. And so I tell him, I said, "I tell you what," and I'm saying this loud for the guys because I really want to hear what he's got to say. But I'm saying this loud, and I said, "I tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. You stop talking to me about Jesus, and I'll go to church with you one night." Mike says, "Deal." He says it too quick. I thought he was going to think about it. He says it real quick. And he says, "I'll get a minister. I know a minister who's an evangelist." I didn't know what an evangelist was. I don't think I know his pastors.
Right.
He said, "I have a friend that's an evangelist who will come to this neighborhood and have a meeting at that church down there on the corner. And he'll have a meeting just for you if you'll come down there on Friday night." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that. But you promised me after this meeting, you're not going to talk to me about Jesus anymore, right?" He said, "Yeah, good deal." And so he didn't know. I mean, I didn't know what he knew. He knew if I got in there in the front of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it didn't make any difference if I had 1 million demons, there was no match for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I made a plan. I had been to church before, and I know that people get into church, and when they start singing and stuff like that, they get excited and all this kind of stuff, and they get up and start praising God or whatever. And once they get to that point, I could go in the church and I could slip out of the back of the church. And I'd made a plan with this guy. You meet me outside the church. The service is going to start at 7 o'clock. you meet me outside of the church at 7:15, and you bring speed. I'm going to get on speed that night. I'm going to start taking speed that night. So the guy said, okay, I'll be there, 7:15. So my plan was to go into the church and stay in there 15 minutes, right? I went into the church and stayed in there 46 years. And the guy that I was supposed to meet outside with the speed, I found out that the speed wasn't cut right, and it would have killed me. So God saved my life and my soul the same night.
My goodness.
Now, this is tremendous now, but at the same time, I got two things I got to deal with. I'm addicted to the drugs that I had started taking. The drugs that I was selling for the game stuff, I started taking them. So I'm addicted, and I'm thinking about I'm going to have to go home, and I'm going to go through this violent withdrawal. And so I'm sitting up in the bed waiting on the withdrawal, and it never came. And so the next day, I went to the game hours. And when I was when that preacher preached that night, man, I'm telling you, when he preached Christ to me that night, I fell in love with Jesus. And so as far as heaven was concerned, that's where I was going when I died. And I know the creed of the game. You don't get out of the game. You die out. That's the only way you get out. And so I knew that when I go over there and I tell them that I'm not coming back, they're going to shoot me. And so I went over there and I told them I'm not coming back. And what I really underestimated was the fact that the anointing of God was on my life. And the demonic spirits that was on their lives, this was no match. And at the same time, they knew me as this animal that they had trained me to be. And when they saw the radical change that was in my life, it actually scared them. And me thinking that once I say what I got to say and I turn around and start walking out of here, they're going to shoot me in the back. But at the same time, I'm going to heaven. In my mind, 16-year-old kid,
wow,
in love with Christ, knowing good and well that he had saved my soul, knowing good and well that if he shoot me right now, I'm going straight to heaven. I won't have to deal with this stuff anymore. And I took one step, took another step, no gunshot, no nothing. Nobody said a word. For 40-something years now, nobody said a word.
That was it. You just walked out of there and you never saw it again, never dealt with that gang again.
Never went back.
Today's show is sponsored by IJM, the International Justice Mission. And right now, violence is a threat to people around the world who are poor, especially during COVID-19. It's as much a part of daily life as hunger, disease, or homelessness, and it's often overlooked, but not by IJM. They believe every person deserves to be safe and free from violence, and by partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors, and strengthen justice systems, IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence across the world. But it's work that they cannot do alone. They need your help. They need our help. The help of Freedom Partners, some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice. These Freedom Partners allow you and I to partner with IJM in support of $24 or more each month, helping survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued till they're fully restored. If you want to join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime, you can visit the website right now, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a Freedom Partner today. Steve Skipper is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, and what an incredibly powerful story that you just shared with us, Steve, and coming to faith and escaping the gangs. But what we really haven't talked about yet is that you are one of the most prolific artists in the country. Like, you have this amazing talent, this gifted talent to paint and to do art, and you are now doing that as a living. God has gifted you with this gift and this amazing platform to be able to just do these amazing portraits and art. And I don't even know how to describe it other than it's just beautiful. And a lot of that has taken you into the sports world. So give us the quick story of how you discovered the talent that you were able to paint and go and become an artist.
Well, I think that, that night when I got saved, the minister ministered so effectively. I don't think that any other minister with the situation I was in could have did a greater job than Jesse L. Mincy Jr. And he started talking about the fact that God was so concerned with every aspect of your life, and God had given us different gifts and talents and stuff like that. And I knew that, I had wanted to be an artist. My brother could draw real good. My uncle was very, very good at art. And so that was something that I wanted to do before the gang situation. I kind of buried it, in the gang situation. And so as he was talking about that, man, and he made a statement that really kind of changed everything. He said, every time that you use the gift that God is giving you, it glorifies and it honors him. And so I'm sitting here and I'm falling in love with Christ, and I realized, you mean tell me I could honor him and make him smile by using my art? And so that was like pouring gasoline on fire. So I started using it. And then one experience that I had was, I remember sitting down one day and working on a drawing. And then I heard God speak to me and say, no, do it like this. And from that point on, he would tell me how to do it. A lot of times we focus on the fact, and we should focus on the fact that Christ is Savior. We focus on the fact that he's a deliverer and he's a healer. But a lot of times we don't focus on the fact that he's creator. And when it comes to creativity, nobody teaches creativity like the creator. And so he started to tell me different things about how to paint and how to draw. And so I'm trying to say this in a way where it can be easily understood, but it's not, because God is so complex in anything he does. But at the same time, when it comes to creativity, there's nobody that knows color like God. There's nobody that knows anatomy and composition. Nobody that knows the depth of it. Nobody that knows anything about creativity like God. And so he starts to talk to me about these different things about how to mix color, how to hold the brush, how to do this and this and this and this. And so the artwork just kind of takes off, start off into a business where I'm working, doing portraits for high school baseball players. And everybody wants a portrait. Back then, I'm doing it for $35 each. Yep. And so there's baseball players want them, their parents are excited and stuff like that. And then football comes in and there's more players. And then now the band, once again, there's hundreds of people in the band. And so I go to frame one of the pictures one day, and there's a guy in there that works for this semi-pro football league in Birmingham. And he says, why don't you do this for the Birmingham Stallions? He said, why don't you do this for the Stallions? He said, I can get you in. And so started doing it for the Stallions and stuff. And then they get ready to fold. And the PR director of the Stallions say, I have a contact with the Atlanta Falcons. Would you want to continue doing this with the Atlanta Falcons? I said, yeah. So we started doing it with the Atlanta Falcons, and the price goes up because of the, pro football. And so then at the same time, there's another guy with the Falcons that says, how would you like to do this with the Hawks? I could get you the Hawks. And if you do one of these of Dominic Wilkins, you'll end up doing all the players and so start working over there. Then there's a guy that comes to Atlanta by the name of Mike Shula. He's playing at the University of Alabama. His dad is Don Shula. Sure. And Don Shula is still living. And so he says, have you ever thought about doing this at the University of Alabama? And I said, yeah, but I don't know who to get. He said, I can get you in contact with Coach Perkins. Go down to meet Coach Perkins. Next thing you know, we're doing it at Alabama. And so first African-American to ever do this stuff at Alabama. But on Perkins' team, he has Cornelius Bennett and Derek Thomas and all these guys playing with him. And so they hear about what I'm doing. And so they started commissioning me to do stuff for them. And like a snowball rolling downhill, you start getting contacts with all these other different coaches and players. And you go from Perkins to Gene Stallings. And now you go to Nick Saban. And now Nick Saban commissions me to do his first national championship. And then everything takes off from there. It goes through the roof. And so started doing all this stuff with the players that were playing in Alabama will go pro. And so they started telling their coaches and their players about it. And so it just explodes, man. It just goes through the roof. And God's just really blessed. And it's a thing where you're not just doing the artwork, but you're getting a chance to meet these players. And behind the scenes, you're starting to see that, they're really, struggling in different areas of their life. And the answer is always Christ. And so you having an opportunity to minister to them at the same time you're making a living. And get a call from some people. Davey Allison is killed in this helicopter crash, and the Allison family calls me to come over and talk about doing a painting of him. Mm-hmm. And so it's one thing about being the first African American to do something in the University of Alabama, and you suffer a whole lot of resistance and a whole lot of stuff. But NASCAR is like a million times worse. so you go to it, and you're the first African American to do artwork with NASCAR. So it just explodes, man. I mean, God is tremendous in the way he does things. And yesterday we just got approval from the NFL. Bart Starr commissioned me to do a painting of him before he passed away, and his family is over that commission now, and NFL just approved that, and so we're going to start marketing that painting to the Packers, and so it's just tremendous opportunity.
Amazing platform, amazing story, the doors that have opened up. The website's colorsofcharactermovie.com. I want people to go to that website. You can actually see a preview of the documentary. It's going to be in theaters November 11th, 12th, 14th, and 15th, and I'm sure streaming or available to somehow watch online after that. But colorsofcharactermovie.com is the website, but you can actually see some of the work that you've done. And this is about as good a quality as you'll find, Steve. It's an amazing gift that God has given you. I'm really just fascinated with the idea of someone being willing to pay you for the work that you know that you're gifted to do. Because I think a lot of people think, well, I have talents, but nobody will ever pay me, or I'll never get in a door like you got with the NFL or the NBA or NASCAR. And I remember when somebody said to me, and I don't even know if this is a gift, I think it is, but somebody asked me once, Steve, hey, would you come and speak to our men at our church? And this is 5-6 years ago. And I said, sure. Why are you asking me? But I'll do it. I've never spoken before, but if that's okay. And they said, yeah, we want you to come and share a little bit about your story. I used to work at ESPN. And so I have like a 17-year experience at ESPN. And they gave me a little bit of an honorarium check when I was finished talking. And I looked at it and I said, oh my goodness, that's X amount of dollars. It was a couple $100 or whatever. And I thought, somebody's going to pay me a couple $100 to talk and speak. But then I talked to some people who actually speak for a living, and they said, well, this is how you start. But eventually, if you're good at this, people will pay you because you have a talent and a gift to connect with people. And so I've seen that rise. But at first I was like, somebody wants to pay me $200 to speak? That's insane. I'm curious if you have a story. You said $35 that first time, and I'm just wondering if your eyes were lighting up that first time when you just saw $35. But then when you, like you said, when you go to the pro football world, and you don't have to give any numbers, obviously, but you start to see somebody offering you maybe a lot more, and you're like, oh, was that okay? Was that an interesting experience for you to kind of accept? Because I think as a follower of Christ, we have a gift, but I also believe that whatever that gift is, it's not something that you want to be taken advantage of just because you're a good Christian dude. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. I think that when I first started out, I just wanted to do it to honor God. It was never for money or nothing like that. And then, God started dealing with me about business and stuff. And so I left the job that I had. I left the job that I had to go into full-time business doing this. And I remember my mom, she had this, she would always tell me, I was struggling. You're talking about a starving artist. I was starving. And she would always do the same thing over and over again. Get a real job, which you get a job. And so over and over again. And so I remember the first time that I did a painting for Derek Thomas, the late Derek Thomas.
Yeah.
And he had just signed his contract with the Chiefs, and and he paid me $10,000 for this painting. And I remember taking the $10,000 check and showing my mom, and she said, and so the next check was $12,000 and so on, and so the business of fine art. Once doing it on the side is one thing, but the business of fine art, where we're gonna not only do the painting, but we're gonna do limited edition prints of the painting, and we're gonna actually sell this painting. We're gonna sell it 1,000 times other than the original. And fans, after the player purchases the original, something like that, or the coach, the fans want reproduction of the painting. So this is a business. And so Alabama fans are like rabid, man. I mean, if you do something on one of these coaches or players down here, they're gonna go crazy over it. And so they would demand that you reproduce it. So it's just the business of it. And I think that I've never gotten used to the fact or gotten to the point of where it's not as big to me as it used to be able to sell my artwork, that somebody really wants it that bad. And then at the same time, I think a strange thing for me, there's a lot of other guys in the sports art business where people will purchase their artwork and then later on, as it appreciates in value, they'll resell it. We tried to get people to resell the artwork and they won't let it go. And I think that's a good thing. So, but, I have to take care of my family and raise my kids and pay bills and stuff like that. And so that's the way that we do it.
When people, who are listening, let's say, and they're thinking, I have a talent and I really want to pursue this full time, not have to work other jobs or whatever, which sometimes you have to do. How old were you when you were able to kind of say, not that you went full time into this and quit your job, but when you were able to go from starving artist to, Derek Thomas is buying my paintings now, but how old were you in this process? Where were you in your journey?
Good question. Probably in my 20s.
Yeah, like late 20s?
20s.
Okay.
And getting sports art in the state of Alabama started out by a guy by the name of Daniel Moore. Very, very, very good artist. He set the standard very, very high here. And so when you're talking about getting into the business, it's very, very organized and very, intricate. And so at an early age, man, to be competitive, you have to learn everything you know about this business. And once you get it good in Alabama under the system here, that will train you and prepare you to go further out. And so once we started going into other areas, I think I was named one of the top sports artists in the world by Beckett. And once that happened, I mean, that started opening doors everywhere. But it's been extremely rewarding. I think that we have a huge project with Bart Starr that's coming up. Got a commission from Bobby Bowden. We're going to be doing some stuff with him and Sylvester Kroon, Dwight Stevenson, a lot of different people we got lined up. But it's pretty detailed business, and I think that we've gone from the sports into the civil rights artwork, and I think that that's extremely powerful area.
When somebody comes to you and says, Steve, like, let's say it was me and I'm this rich, famous football player, which I'm not, but let's say it was me and I said, Steve, I want you to paint a portrait of me when I was playing in the NFL. I need it by, or I wouldn't even say I need it by. What would you say is the realistic time frame? Like, how long does it take you to put together one of these portraits, which if people go check out that documentary, Colors of Character, movie.com, they're going to see these things are beautiful and detailed and almost lifelike in a lot of ways, which is what makes great art, I think, and fine art. But how long does that take you to put one of those things together and paint it?
It's a long process now. I mean, the style that we work in is called super realism, and it's going to take a long time. It takes anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 hours to do one painting. I mean, wow. You're going to be there for probably 4.5 months. I think it took almost 5 months to do the one we did on Bart Starr. And so it's going to take some time. And so at this point in time, with everything that's going on, I mean, you can do probably maybe 2 a year because you got to supervise the reproduction process also. And so it's very intricate. And we're going to take it to the limit when it comes to quality. We've got people, our reproduction team is probably the best in the world. But when it comes to studio time, I'm like, my wife knows I'm like living like a hermit.
So you're not doing 2 or 3 at a time? That's never the case. It's always one each at a time?
Oh no, you can't do 2 or 3 at a time, man. The focus that it takes to make this stuff look real, and to really do it like like you're supposed to, it's going to take time. It takes tremendous focus.
Hmm. As we wind down, and this has been great chatting with you, Steve. I'm so grateful that you were able to come on our show. I'm just wondering what the Lord has been showing you and teaching you this year, specifically this year, 2020. We talked about it a little bit earlier, the racial unrest, the divided country politically. We're in a pandemic, which for you, I guess that's not so bad because you'll just coop yourself up and start working. But what's God been showing you and teaching you this year?
Well, the biggest thing is for us to get prepared to get out of here. We're living in the last days, and I think that the enemy is trying his best to distract us and put us on a whole lot of different wild goose chases when it comes to race and all that kind of stuff. And we're not focused on the fact that the most important thing is to be prepared to get out of here, and the fact that it's going to happen suddenly, in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. So you don't have any time to be distracted. And when it comes to your preparation spiritually, that's the most important thing, is to be prepared to get out of here, and at the same time to witness to as many people as you can to help them get prepared to get out of here. And so I think the enemy is doing I wouldn't want to give him any kind of credit, but I think he's doing a job, because he realized he has a short time, and he realized where he's going to end up, and misery loves company. So he's working pretty hard to get people distracted. I think the hate and the racial unrest and stuff like that just comes from, this is going to sound crazy, man, but I tell you, the simplicity of it is just people don't sit down and talk to one another and understand where, man, you'd be surprised how we're not as different as we think we are.
Yeah.
And I think that when you go on assumption, which is the lowest form of knowledge, and you don't communicate, you don't realize, man, that the reasons why you don't like this guy are trivial. And at the same time, you have a lot of stuff in common. And then at the same time, there's a God that can bring us together. And he's the only one that can do it. And it won't take 1,000,000 years for him to do it. And when it comes to people's hearts, man, you can't legislate the enemy out of people's hearts. The only somebody that can get that out is Christ. I don't care how many laws you change. I don't care how many protests you do. I don't care how many buildings you burn down or whatever. That's not going to change the situation. The simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ it's thrown people for years that God can do so much stuff with so much simplicity. And I'm telling you, man, if he could change my life with everything that I was doing, I don't see anybody out there doing, I see people marching in the street and I see people, calling each other names, but that's trivial compared to what he did in my life. If he can do this in my life, I know he can solve this problem. So I think that, man, there's a tremendous amount of good people in America, very good people. And there's just a handful, it doesn't look like it, but it looks like it's a lot of people, but it's a handful of people that are kind of crazy out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the handful of people that are crazy, they're the ones that have the microphones. And see, that the good people are just too quiet. We need to, in the history of this country, you always seen the good people stand. Sooner or later, they stand up. And this situation changes. And I believe that God is going to do the same thing. I believe good people, good men, white, black, Jew, Gentile, they'll stand up eventually. And the situation is going to turn around. But I believe that even in the turnaround, the most important thing is we're living in the last days. Jesus is getting ready to come back. And we've got to get people prepared to leave here.
We need to be prepared spiritually. I'm going to repeat what you said earlier too. Assumption is the lowest form of knowledge. I know you kind of just said it and kind of glanced over into what you had to say, but I wrote that one down. And that one's going to stick with me, Steve Skipper. This has been fantastic. Thanks for sharing your story here on Sports Spectrum. Colorsofcharactermovie.com is the website. He is Steve Skipper. He's featured in the upcoming documentary Colors of Character in theaters November 11th, 12th, 14, and 15, select theaters, and then streaming, I'm sure, online somewhere. You can find out more, colorsofcharactermovie.com. Steve Skipper, thanks, my friend. This was fantastic. Great to meet you, my friend.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
And many thanks to Steve Skipper for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. What an incredible story. And that upcoming documentary that we talked about, Colors of Character, An Artist's Journey to Redemption, it shares the extraordinary journey of this man, Steve Skipper. No formal training at all. He's broken down walls of racism in the world of fine art. Again, the website, one more time, colorsofcharactermovie.com. colorsofcharactermovie.com. Make sure you go check it out. This guy's story is incredible, and the gift that God has given him and the art that he creates is just fantastic. It's truly fantastic. And I wish I could tell you what Steve did after we finished recording our interview, but I'm going to let that stay between me and Steve. But let me just say, he's an incredible guy. He really is. And I'm thankful that he joined us here today on Sports Spectrum. colorsofcharactermovie.com. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. Again, we want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for everything Sports Spectrum related, the intersection of sports and faith. And then whatever app that you're listening to this podcast on, the best thing to do is click subscribe. That way you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And if you have a chance on Apple Podcasts and you have a second, do us a favor, leave us a quick review. It just helps get the word out, and all those reviews kind of elevate the status of the podcast. And so far, we've got over 400 reviews on our podcast on Apple, and that's people like you listening, tuning in, and we're grateful. We really are, because this show doesn't exist without you listening. It's one thing to make a show. It's another thing to have people actually tune in and listen to it. And so the fact that you are doing that right now means so much to me. It means so much to our staff here at Sports Spectrum, and we are truly grateful. Thank you again for tuning in. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time for another episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.